For today's photo scavenger hunt, we will be focusing on the element of line and the principle of balance. Let's start first by discussing the element of line. Lines are extremely foundational to the creation of artwork. Without line, we can't create art. Lines are also extremely easy and simple to understand. Let's review what we covered yesterday. A line is created when a path moves throughout space. Lines are one-dimensional because they are all created with a single moving point. Lines can vary, however, in their width, direction, or length. Making these slight changes can create for more interesting lines. Whether your lines are extremely thin and delicate, or slightly thicker, or even very, very bold, that difference in width is called the line's weight. Different line weights are used for different things. Very, very thin, delicate lines can create details that thicker lines cannot. Thicker lines, however, are a little bit more strong and sturdy and can support more complex elements. Lines can move in multiple directions across the paper. However, the three most common would be left to right, which is known as horizontal, top to bottom, which is known as vertical, or at an angle across the paper, which is known as diagonal. Now, while these are the three most common directions a line can move, they are not the only ways lines can move across a paper. There are limitless lines and limitless ways that they can move. Whether those lines are straight, curved, diagonal, wavy, zigzagged, even dotted or spiraled lines, depending on the artwork you are making, you may use one or several types of lines to create your art. Now, while lines are most commonly used to form more complex things like shapes and forms, lines themselves can be the subject of an artwork. Let's take Gene Davis's painting Apricot Ripple. This entire work of art is constructed using only straight vertical lines. They change colors, but the only thing seen here are lines. I actually think this work of art is really cool and interesting to look at. I think the consistency of the lines and the cool colors chosen is what I like so much about it. Let us turn our attention now to one of the principles of design. For today, we will be focusing on the principle of balance. Balance is perhaps the most important of all of the principles of design because balance influences how an artist even sets up their artwork. Let's review what we discussed yesterday. Balance means the distribution of the visual weight in an artwork. For an artwork to be well balanced, there should be an equal amount of visual information spread throughout the art. There shouldn't be one central focus that dominates the artwork. In this photograph of the bridge, for example, our eye moves across the entire paper. There's an equal amount of visual information on both the left and the right of the page. I don't want you to confuse artistic balance for physical balance. You do not need to take a picture today of something being stacked up and not falling over. This is not what artistic balance is. Artistic balance means that the visual information in your artwork is well composed. It's spread throughout the picture. You don't need to take a picture today of a stack of books not falling over. So, what is balance in artwork? Well, we know that balance refers to the distribution of the visual weight of a composition. A well balanced composition feels comfortable to look at. If we look at this work of art here to the right, something about it is a little off. That's mostly because there's this big open space here to the right. We see most of the visual information in this artwork is here, to the left of the composition. What would happen if we were to place another shape here in that empty void? Well, now our composition is a little bit more well thought out and a little bit more balanced. Composition is the placement or arrangement of the visual elements in a work of art. It's how an artwork is organized. A simple trick that artists use to help them compose their artwork is known as the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds suggests that if you were to take a work of art and divide it into thirds, both top to bottom and left to right, to create a series of 9 boxes, the corners at which those boxes intersect give you a good idea of where you should put the visual information of your artwork. Let's look at a couple of tips suggested by the rule of thirds. Tip 1. Try placing the subject of your artwork at a point where lines intersect. In this photo to the right, the subject, the woman at the forefront of the picture, was placed at the point where the left and the bottom lines meet. She could have been placed at any one of those corners. This artist chose to place her down at the bottom. Those lines naturally draw your eye to the subject, giving you a more well-balanced composition. Tip number 2 would suggest that if you have artwork where there are multiple pieces of information or multiple focal points, like seen here, you should try to place as many of them as you can at corners where lines intersect. You'll see that this work of art has a boat placed near this corner of the rule of thirds, as well as the two most eye-catching mountain ranges placed directly at a point where lines intersect. So if you're taking a photograph of something that has multiple focal points, you may want to consider placing as many as you can here where corners intersect. What do you do, however, if you have no focal point in your artwork? Well, tip number 3 would suggest that if you have no focal point at all in your artwork, but you do, however, have a horizon line, you should try to place that horizon line on or as close to one of those 1/3 lines as you can. This artist chose not to do that. Their horizon line divides this paper almost perfectly in half. It'll be easier to see if I overlay the rule of thirds on top. You see how the horizon line divides the artwork in half and not into thirds? This is a beautiful photo, but it could have been made better by instead placing this horizon line on either this top or bottom 1/3 line. I'll show you an example that did that. This artist chose to focus their art mostly on the negative space of the night sky, which is why it occupies 2/3 of the composition. The ground down here below occupies 1/3 of the composition. The horizon line is placed close to this horizontal line as possible. This creates a more well-balanced composition. When photographing your item or your object today, you may want to consider how you're going to compose your shot. You may want to choose to focus your information here at the corners, or if photographing a horizon line, you may want to consider placing it about 1/3 either up or down from the paper as shown here.